Mr Neil Mitchell.
Mr Davies, hi, Neil Mitchell again. Firstly, I just want to make some points about the underlying financial position upon which you are now looking to buy back the shares, and then secondly to come on to a list of specific points and points of order in relation to the resolution. Firstly, I just want to remind you, and it's important for a number of reasons, including legal reasons, that I bring this meeting to be aware, that I did say to you in the AGM that there was the prospect of pending litigations on legacy issues here in the UK, and also criminal, regulatory and civil claims in overseas jurisdictions. And I listed those jurisdictions, and I asked you to notify your principal shareholder and also the regulators in those jurisdictions. I did remind you of your duties of care, your corporate governance responsibilities, your regulatory obligations and your fiduciary duties. My understanding is that you chose not to take any of those actions, instead saying that the FCA were investigating the matter in the UK only. They, of course, have now issued a statement saying that they have effectively found nothing, but that wasn't a surprise. And as you may be aware, and shareholders should be aware, that I've now sought an application for a judicial review of that process of the S166 GRG review. And that remains a legacy issue, and potentially a significant legacy and litigation, and therefore financial issue. That application now has been superseded by a further application for an actual oral hearing in the Royal Courts of Justice. And secondly, this morning, I don't know if shareholders are aware, there's been a press release by a campaign group called Research for Action, highlighting that 42 local authorities in Scotland and the rest of the UK could be about to launch legal proceedings on Lobo notes. I understand that 2 have actually done that today, and that there will be further media coverage about that this evening. The liability potentially across the 42 authorities, local government, is £1.4 billion. Coincidentally, exactly the same amount of money as the board are currently looking to consider in the share buyback. These are live issues, legacy issues, and could lead to litigation. On the subject of litigation, since I last spoke to you at the annual general meeting, I have now since collected nearly 600 claims that have been verified and validated by legal teams and have a minimum quantum of £15 billion. You were notified of these as pending. They remain pending, and they will come to fruition in the UK jurisdictions and overseas jurisdictions in the year of 2019, the very year that you're now seeking to buy back shares. This could clearly be material to the ongoing viability of RBS as a going concern, given your present-day market capitalisation. Furthermore, to finish this point and then move on to the actual resolution, I wish to inform you that because you didn't, I have actually met with your principal shareholder. On the 18th of January, I spent an hour and 10 minutes with Chancellor Philip Hammond in private, briefing him on everything I've just said to you and much wider issues, and specifically in relation to share sales and specifically in relation to this resolution. And as he confirmed with me at the time, I was speaking to the principal shareholder of the bank in question. So he has been fully informed, and therefore the Treasury have been fully informed that there are ongoing issues, financial and legal. I find it abhorrent that you are at this moment in time, therefore, seeking to use excess capital on the balance sheet to buy back shares, when to me you should be retaining those funds, those excess funds, in case of the need to compensate either victims of legacy issues such as RBS GRG or indeed local authorities in the Lobo loan issue. So now I would like to turn to the share buyback itself. I don't understand what the rush is for this resolution today in February, when there is an AGM coming in May. We could have waited, and you could have asked for shareholder permissions then, and it would have saved a fortune, probably millions of pounds, on postage and event costs for today. I would say that the rush is not in the best interests of all shareholders. It is actually instead in the best interests of the Treasury. It is politically motivated, not shareholder value driven. You're running scared of the prospect of a general election, be that imminent or at the end of the 5-year term, and the prospect of a Labour government. You're running scared that the Labour Party has recently announced that it would seek to renationalise RBS, a policy headed up and pushed by John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, who I have also met with, and that he would fully nationalise RBS and turn it into a development bank broken up into 100 local branches for the people, on the basis that the taxpayers, the people and the shareholders have all realised that we are not getting our bailout money back of £46 billion. So this buyback is flawed in that it's about actually driving down the government's shareholder position from 63% to below 50% before a general election. Even the business editor of the Sunday Times did an excellent business editorial on this 2 weeks ago, making that very point. Finally, so let's get to the buyback proposal as it stands. It is certainly controversial. Buybacks such as this are manipulative. They are often used for ulterior motives. They are poorly timed, and it's questionable value to shareholders. I am of the view that private discussions and agreements between a company, in this case RBS, and its majority shareholder, in this case Her Majesty's Government, the Treasury, UKGI, are generally contrary to good governance practice. It is noticeable that this resolution doesn't place a cap on the price paid for the UKGI shares. It doesn't specify a minimum core Tier 1 ratio that should then be reached after any buyback. The timing is poor, 3 months before an AGM, and without the benefit of full-year financial reports and detailed financials. So does it signal an imminent sale of shares by Her Majesty's Treasury as well? This all seems to be very political. Is the Treasury controlling this process rather than the board? Just as the Treasury, indeed the APA, according to your former head of GRG, Derek Sack, was controlling the GRG misconduct. That's the latest excuse for that misconduct. So I would suggest that this proposal makes it clear that UKGI cannot easily sell these shares in the market, nor place them with institutions who are not buying the story that RBS has changed for the better. They're not buying the story that all the legacy and litigation issues are by and past, and that this is why the shares are only being bought back from UKGI. It is also interesting that they're not being bought back from all shareholders. This share buyback is also effectively a reduction in capital, when banks like RBS still have relatively thin equity capital base. What's laughable, the irony, is that the government have recently commissioned research into share buybacks a year or so ago on the grounds that they may be used to inflate executive pay. That government report is yet to be issued. Yet here we have a government-driven buyback. This should be made illegal. Such a buyback will not benefit RBS shareholders, as it can be used by foolish management to try to manage the share price by pushing the share price up. RBS are, of course, seeking to buy back shares when the price is low. Her Majesty's Treasury will get more funding out of this and out of this buyback because no discount is being applied to the market. Yet again, it's not available to all shareholders. So, Mr. Chairman, I've made a lot of points, and I would ask that you write to me outside of the meeting addressing every one of my points raised, as well as responding in this general meeting. For all the reasons stated, I do not think that this buyback by RBS of its own shares, or indeed any sale by Her Majesty's Treasury UKGI, should go ahead until all, and I repeat, all outstanding legacy litigation issues are properly resolved, properly accounted for, with proper contingent liabilities. In the absence of proper investigations by the RBS Board and the FCA, I will continue to call for a public inquiry which has cross-political party support. And in conclusion, it It is my view that this excess capital, as you call it, should be held in reserve to pay for contingent liabilities. Consider yourself warned again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell, for expressing a number of points about the case for and against the buyback, which does ensure that shareholders hear some of the potential arguments against. I can say that in the case particularly of the conduct points which you make, that this is something which the board has carefully considered. Indeed, the issue of potential future liability for conduct is one thing which is part of the regulator's stress test every year. They have to consider the extent to which we are, and indeed other banks, exposed to the potential costs of legacy issues, or indeed future ones. And we did consider that carefully. We looked at the issues we had resolved. We looked at the litigation that we faced, the regulatory action we faced, and we reached a judgment that, in the light of the stress test result which took that into account, we were confident that the bank was in a sufficiently strong capital position to be able to consider capital distributions. Because, as I've said, we are targeting a capital in medium-term target of 13% or a little bit more than that for some of the reasons I've explained, and we are well above that. And we believe that this buyback provision that we are asking for approval for today is well within prudent capital management. And we are encouraged in that by the results of the stress tests of a rather extreme kind, in fact, set for us by our regulators. As for the other points you make about the Labour Party's views, they will have to speak for themselves. And I would emphasise, in terms of the price, as I did in response to Mr. Birchall, that this is just a provision to empower the board to make purchases, and the Treasury would need to decide for itself whether that was something where the price was appropriate in the light of its broad duty to achieve value for money for the taxpayer. So we are saying nothing here about the specific price on which we would buy shares back. So our judgment was that it was a prudent course of action to take, to ask for shareholder approval to undertake this transaction. As for the reason for the timing, we believe that there is an open period coming. The Treasury may wish to use that. We do not know, but we think it would be wise for us to be in a position to be able to respond were they to wish to do so. We will come back to this issue at the AGM and ask for renewal of the approval. But we thought it was wise and prudent to take that approval now. So thank you for your points. We believe we have taken them into account in reaching the judgment we have reached today.